My name is Julia, and 3 months ago, I was the kind of person others called untouchable. I ran the creative strategy team at one of the top branding agencies in Boston. My name opened doors, closed deals, and filled conference rooms with silence when I entered. I wore my title like a designer suit, tailored to fit just right. I knew how to speak the language of influence, how to land million-dollar accounts, how to make myself indispensable. I didn't just play the game. I helped write the rules. From the outside, I was everything people admired: sharp, stylish, successful. I lived in a corner apartment downtown, ran 5 miles every morning, and collected awards that lined the wall behind my desk like trophies of a life well earned. But there's always a corner you don't show, a moment you tuck away and pray never surfaces. Mine was buried beneath a decision I made in 2019. During a regional high school art competition. It was a small thing, I told myself back then, the kind of favor people whispered about but never admitted. A parent of one of the finalists had approached me privately. Their daughter needed the scholarship to get into an elite program, they said. They offered a donation to the foundation I chaired. I didn't ask questions. I took the envelope. I gave her the highest score. The girl who should have won, the one whose work made my skin tingle, ended up in third. Her name wasn't even on the shortlist for interviews. I remember her face when they announced the winner, how still she stood, as if the ground had shifted beneath her. I walked away from that event with a bonus in my bank account and no second thoughts. At least, not then. In this world, shortcuts weren't scandalous. They were a strategy. That's how I justified it. Everyone plays dirty when the stakes are high. I was just smart enough not to get caught. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that 3 years later, a woman would walk into my office, take a seat across from me, and quietly start unraveling everything I'd built. Not with lawsuits, not with headlines, with silence, and with something far more dangerous than accusations: memory. Lena joined our team at the start of September. She was 25, recently graduated from a top design school, and recommended by a VP who rarely vouched for interns. I remember the first time I saw her: pale blue shirt, hair tied back, notebook in hand, eyes sharp but unreadable. She didn't speak much. She listened, observed. She showed up early, stayed quiet in meetings, and submitted assignments that didn't need a single edit. My team was impressed. So was my boss. They called her focused, efficient, and self-directed. I called her lucky. She had landed on the best team in the agency, under me, and I figured she knew it. That's what I thought, until the fourth day, when everything shifted. We were alone in the break room, waiting for the coffee machine to reboot. No small talk, just the sound of brewing. Then she turned to me, eyes calm but fixed, and said, "You probably don't remember what you did in 2019, but my sister does." Just like that. No lead-in. No explanation. I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. Before I could ask, she walked out with her coffee like she'd said nothing unusual. I stood there gripping the counter, heart pounding. My first instinct was denial. She must have meant something else. She had to. But something about the way she'd said it, so measured, so sure, stayed with me. I thought back to the competition, the scholarship, the girl with the raw talent, her painting, her face, her silence. Then I thought of the envelope I'd slipped into my purse. I hadn't said a word about that day in years. How could this intern possibly know? I looked up her resume that afternoon. No mention of a sister. Her references were solid. Her school records are clean. No overlap with anyone I remembered from the art board. I tried searching her name alongside the competition online. Nothing. She didn't seem to be hiding anything. But that only made it worse. Every time I glanced over at her desk, she was typing, reviewing, and meeting deadlines without being asked. She greeted me politely each morning. Never brought up what she'd said. And never even looked at me funny. I started watching her more closely. At first I told myself it was just professional curiosity, but by the second week, I was tracking which accounts she touched, how long she spent on each task, and who she talked to at lunch. She never slipped. Not once. Her designs were sleek and strategic. Her feedback from clients glowed. Our CEO even mentioned her name in a weekly roundup. I smiled through clenched teeth. One evening, I stayed late under the excuse of catching up. Lena was still there, headphones in, editing a pitch deck I'd tossed her that morning. She nodded when I passed her desk, then returned to her screen. I opened her file drawer the minute she left. Nothing unusual, just office supplies and a pack of gum. Her laptop was locked, her desk spotless. The only personal item was a small Polaroid tucked behind her monitor. Two young girls, maybe teenagers, arms around each other in front of a painting. I stared at it longer than I should have. There was no label, no date, no hint of context. Just two sisters. Maybe, or maybe, something else. Entirely. When I turned around, I half expected her to be standing behind me. She wasn't. Still, when I got home that night, there was a text from an unknown number. Just 5 words. I see you, Julia. I dropped the phone. My hands trembled. But the next morning, Lena walked in like any other day. Quiet, professional, unbothered. Not a single mention of the text. No shift in her tone. No hint she knew I'd been at her desk. Which made me wonder if she ever really sent the message at all. Maybe I was imagining it. Or maybe she was watching more than I realized. Either way, I started locking my own drawers. For the first time in years, I felt like the weak link on my own team. And Lena? She didn't have to say another word. She had already said enough. It started with a missed call. Then a forgotten meeting. Then a misaddressed email I sent to the wrong client, attaching confidential drafts meant for someone else entirely. I brushed it off, told myself I was tired, overworked, and distracted by quarter-end stress. But inside, something had already cracked, and I couldn't stop the pieces from slipping. I stayed late to fix mistakes I never used to make. Lena never said anything. She just picked up the slack without comment. When I was late to our Monday pitch, she had already rearranged the agenda and eased the client's frustration before I arrived. By week 3, I stopped sleeping through the night. I would wake up gasping, thinking about that girl's painting from years ago, about the envelope, about the weight of secrets pressed into my past like fingerprints in wet cement. I started testing Lena, gave her assignments with missing briefs, moved deadlines up without warning, created confusion in client feedback just to watch how she handled it. She passed every trap like she saw it coming. I needed people to see her differently. So I started talking. Casual comments over lunch, light jokes in the hallway. I suggested Lena had a bit of a temper, that she was territorial, a little controlling. I even hinted she might have said something strange about me behind closed doors. But every time I planted a seed, it withered. Someone would say she helped fix their presentation, or that she stayed late to help a junior staffer without credit. Her reputation bloomed while mine withered. Soon, I caught people looking at me differently. My boss asked if I was feeling okay. HR reminded me about our wellness stipend. The team stopped looping me into side chats. I became a ghost in meetings I used to lead. Lena never raised her voice. Never made a scene. She just worked. Silently, perfectly. It felt like being slowly erased by air. I didn't know where to place the blame anymore. Maybe I never had control to begin with. Or maybe she was right there, pulling every thread and waiting for me to come undone. They called me into the conference room just after lunch. Dale, my director, was already seated, calm and unreadable. Lena was beside him, hands folded, expression as neutral as ever. "We need to talk about restructuring," Dale said. My stomach tightened. I waited for the usual routine, a shift in org charts, a new assistant to support my team. Instead, he said Lena would be stepping in as interim team lead. Effective immediately. I barely registered the rest. Something about leadership development. Something about recent performance patterns. I felt heat rise in my chest. I turned to him, trying to keep my voice even, and said he couldn't be serious. 7 years of results, of awards, of client growth. He looked at me gently, like I'd already started unraveling. I said this was personal, that Lena wasn't who she seemed, that she had a motive. I told them about the competition, the bribe, her sister, her threat. On her first day, it all came out in a rush, like a confession dressed as accusation. Dale blinked slowly, then turned to Lena. Is that true? She tilted her head slightly and asked what competition he was talking about. She said she didn't have a sister. She said she'd been focused on learning the job I was training her for. She said I'd been acting strange, that she'd noticed stress. She paused, then said she was concerned for me. I wanted to scream. She lied so calmly. I almost believed her myself. Dale glanced at me again, quietly said, maybe I needed some time off. Just 2 weeks. Clear my head. Get some distance. This wasn't disciplinary, he assured. Just space. Just care. I laughed, or maybe I choked. I honestly couldn't tell. The room felt far away. I stood up and walked out, past my team, past the interns, past the framed campaign photos on the wall I'd once led. Lena didn't follow. She didn't have to. She had everything she needed. I was gone. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I'd been set up, or if I'd simply fallen into the trap I built myself. The first few days of forced leave felt like punishment without a name. I stayed in my apartment, barely changing out of sweats, checking my email every hour for something, anything, to prove they still needed me. But the inbox stayed quiet, except for automated reminders and one message from Dale asking how I was feeling. I told myself I'd bounce back, that I'd return and reclaim my role. But each time I imagined walking back in, I saw their faces, how they had looked at me when I raised my voice in that conference room, when I accused Lena with shaking hands and no proof. On the 5th day, there was an envelope waiting outside my door. No return address, just my name, written neatly. Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellowed around the edges, folded twice. The headline read, Regional Art Contest Winner Disqualified for Plagiarism. The article was brief. The winning piece, praised for its originality, had been exposed 2 years later as partially copied from a lesser-known European painter. The prize was revoked. The scholarship was rescinded. No names were mentioned. But I remembered the painting. I remembered who I had helped win and who I had helped lose. Tucked behind the article was a note, handwritten in smooth, steady ink. Maya starts art school next fall. Your severance paid for it. Tenfold return. It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be. I read the note again, slower this time. The message was clear. Lena hadn't destroyed me. She had simply waited. Arranged the pieces. Let me pull the thread myself. I sank into the couch, hands numb. For the first time in years, I couldn't pretend I was the victim. I wasn't being punished for one mistake. I was unraveling from a pattern I had never truly reckoned with. The shortcuts, the self-justification, the belief that I was too sharp to ever get caught. Lena hadn't made a single public accusation. She didn't need to. She just put me in a position where every move I made became part of my own undoing. It was quiet, surgical, devastating. I tried to feel anger. I wanted to call it manipulative, cold, unforgiving. But as I sat with that article in my lap, I felt something else. Shame. Not the performative kind you offer to salvage reputation, but the heavy, aching kind that makes you question everything you thought made you successful. Maya had survived. She had gone back to her art. She was building a future I nearly cost her. And somehow, through a chain of consequences I never saw coming, she had been given a second chance. It hit me then, like a slow, painful truth. This wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even revenge. It was justice, designed not to break me, but to make me see. And once you see, you can't look away. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of it all press down. Maybe this was the only kind of punishment I would ever truly feel. Not losing my title, not the isolation, but the knowledge that I had been the architect of it all, and that someone, somewhere, had decided I was still worth teaching. I didn't plan to go to the exhibit. The invitation sat on my dresser for days, its elegant cardstock whispering reminders I didn't want to hear. But on the night of the opening, I found myself driving across town with no destination other than whatever closure might be waiting for me. The gallery was tucked between a bakery and a yoga studio. Warm light spilled from its windows, and inside, people moved slowly, pausing in front of canvas after canvas. I stood outside for a long time, my hand hovering over the door, unsure if I belonged in a space built on the pain I had caused. When I stepped inside, the first thing I saw was color, deep, bruised tones, balanced by soft, hopeful light. Paintings that didn't scream for attention, but asked for understanding. The crowd parted enough for me to see her. Maya. She stood near the center of the gallery, tall and composed, speaking with quiet confidence to a small group of listeners. At 19, she looked nothing like the shattered girl I remembered through rumor and assumption. There was strength in her stillness, and something even harder to bear, joy. I didn't approach her, I couldn't. Instead, I wandered through the exhibit like a stranger, pausing in front of a piece titled Consequence. It showed a woman's silhouette made of broken glass, each shard reflecting a different version of herself. I felt someone step beside me, and before I even turned, I knew it was Lena. She didn't speak right away. We stood together in silence, facing the painting. Like it held an answer we were both afraid to say aloud. Finally, she said, "Maya painted this after you got the letter." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She turned to me and said, "The gallery's looking for an assistant curator, someone with organizational experience, someone who understands both art and accountability." I laughed, or tried to. The sound came out wrong. "After everything?" I asked. "You're offering me a job." She didn't blink. "I'm offering you a role that helps others, not yourself. That gives more than it takes. A place where what you once broke can become part of something better." I wanted to say no, that I didn't deserve it, that this was too easy. But nothing about it felt easy. It felt like being handed something heavy and asked to carry it forward. Not for redemption, for responsibility. She said Maya supported the idea, that she believed people could grow if given the right pressure and the right grace. I asked, why? Why not let me fade into the background, vanish under the weight of my own mistakes? "Because letting you disappear," she said, "would be a punishment. Giving you a task is a challenge. The difference is whether you show up for it." I didn't give her an answer that night. I walked back through the exhibit, stopping at a painting titled Reclaiming. It showed a cracked surface filled with golden thread, like someone had stitched the damage into something more honest. On the way out, Maya caught my eye. She didn't smile, she didn't nod, but she didn't look away, either. I held her gaze for just a second, longer than I could bear, then stepped into the night air, lungs full of things I couldn't name. Later, I found myself pacing the kitchen, fingers drumming the counter, the card from the gallery burning a quiet hole in my coat pocket. I wasn't sure I wanted the job. I was even less sure I could do it. But I knew one thing with sudden clarity. This wasn't about Lena, or Maya, or even the competition anymore. It was about who I would become if given a space to contribute rather than control, to serve rather than shine, and maybe, just maybe, to make something right without needing to be forgiven first. So I called the gallery the next morning. My voice cracked slightly when I said my name. The woman on the other end didn't seem surprised. She said they were expecting me. I hung up, staring out the window at a city I once thought I owned. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I'd show up, not because I deserved the chance, but because it was the first time in years I wanted to earn something the right way. The gallery felt different when I wasn't just a guest. I learned the rhythm of hanging schedules, how to handle fragile frames, and how to speak to collectors without selling a fantasy. My hands, once used to typing brand strategies, now sort catalogs in clean glass cases. Maya came in most afternoons. She rarely said much, but her presence filled the room. Some days, she painted in the back studio with music low and steady, like her brush needed only quiet to work. One morning, I arrived early to help prep for a small, private viewing. A new series had just been installed, and one canvas caught me before I could finish my checklist. It was titled Bridges. Two figures stood on opposite ends of a fractured wooden bridge. One held out a hand, the other wasn't crossing. Not yet. But they were facing each other, willing. There was no plaque, no explanation. But I felt my chest tighten, as if the silence between them held every word I hadn't said. I stood there for a long time, not moving, until I sensed someone behind me. It was Lena. She was dressed simply, a scarf around her neck, coffee in hand. She didn't ask if I liked the piece. She didn't mention my work. She just said one thing. Justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it means letting someone walk themselves back from the edge. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I finally understood what she'd done. She hadn't pushed me. She'd just stepped out of the way and let gravity finish what I'd started. She left without saying goodbye. She never needed closure. I did. Later that afternoon, I passed by Bridges again. I stood a little longer, then reached out and gently straightened the corner of the frame. It didn't need fixing, but it felt right to do something small and quiet, just to say, I saw it. That night, I locked up the gallery alone. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Some transformations aren't loud. They don't come with applause or forgiveness. They come with a choice, and sometimes choosing to change is the only apology that matters.